This is going to be weird because I'm going to be like looking up because my camera's right here. All right. So Antichrist begins with the death of a small child from a couple who are not named in the movies. They go by he and she in the credits. And that's Willem Dafoe and Charlotte Gainsbourg. So they lose their child very, very early on in the movie in sort of the prologue. Total grief from that moment on. And he is a psychologist or a psychiatrist and decides that he wants to treat his own wife.
Which is like the worst idea anyone's ever had. Like that's the number one rule.
Right. Number one rule, you don't treat your own family members.
Yeah.
So, of course, he will pay for breaking that rule, as people usually pay when they break rules in movies. They try lots of psychotherapy things on the wife, and eventually they decide to go to their cabin named Eden. Lars von Trier, in press conferences, seemed a little embarrassed about Eden.
It's funny to me that he admitted that it was over the top. Like, you think he'd just go with it.
Right. But it's hard to know when to take any particular thing that he does seriously, you know?
Yeah.
He's such a provocateur. So intentionally a provocateur as opposed to, you know, just having provocative ideas, you know?
Yeah.
So they go to Eden and things from there escalate as she sort of spirals downward, and maybe he's spiraling into some sort of irretrievable place as well in terms of sympathy for his wife and, you know, the intimacy with his wife. But it's very much a film without a story so much as, you know, provocative ideas about psychotherapy and about nature as the church of Satan is a big line in the movie.
Yeah, that's like...
So what'd you make of that,
Katey? It seems like it's not really about their relationship. Like, I think what would have made it more interesting for me is if it had been a story about a couple and them being together, rather than this whole thesis of, like, nature is Satan's church, that nature is killing us. Because, like, it's not like that's a theme that's shown up in movies before. Like, I don't really know where Von Trier got this from. Mm-hmm. So, you know, it shows up, and when you get to, like, the point where things start going to hell, like, all that it seems to be saying is nature will destroy you.
Mm-hmm.
I can't, like...
But I'm not sure if it's meant to be that literal, because maybe the nature is human nature. As opposed to the actual nature that they're in, because, you know, Lars von Trier gets a lot of flack for being misogynistic, but I've always thought that he was just, if he's anything, it's more misanthropic than misogynistic.
Yeah, that's definitely how I felt. Like, she's crazy, but he's a pain in the ass, too. But when you talk about not being literal, like, at the end with the, I guess spoiler alert, but you can't really spoil, like, you know, the big shock moments are all over the internet. Like, when he's walking out and there's the bodies spread everywhere.
You mean?
Like, in the roots of the trees. Like,
right.
That seems like a very literal interpretation of nature killing you.
It's effective because it's very hallucinatory, and and it sort of puts you in the headspace you need to be in to deal with a film like that. Because their sexuality, which should be sort of a healing, intimate thing between them, always seems to be connected to things getting even worse.
Yeah, and I guess their attitude towards sexuality was another thing that, like, was hard to connect to them as humans, because, like, no one's, like, sobbing and having sex with someone at the same time, and, like, the partner's just, like, fine with it. You know, they're not, like, you realize that they're in grief, but they don't act enough like people.
For me, they don't read as people so much as, like, ideas. So much as just he is the man and she is the woman. I think it's meant to be a less literal.
Well, do you think that the theme can pull itself off and what he's trying to say can work when you have these characters who are just archetypes and don't have any connection to the audience?
Well, for me, it didn't. I appreciated the visuals a lot. The cinematography by Anthony Dodd Mantle is amazing with the production design of Eden, and there's so many arresting visual things that happen, but it's just, if you've dealt with his misanthropy before, his intentional provocations about how you feel about Von Trier, like, I really feel like this movie is about Von Trier more than it's about nature or the couple.
Yeah. And it's hard to connect on that.
I did see it in sort of, like, I wasn't feeling well, and I thought about giving it another shot. But I
could not sit through it again. I guess I had been warned about all the violent stuff beforehand, so I was ready for it. But I wasn't. It didn't feel as shocking to me as I think he wanted it to, because you're already in La La Land. Like, there's nothing unexpected about it because you're expecting anything.
Well, there's nothing tethering you to reality.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So when they're acting irrationally, that's pretty much all you've come to expect from these characters.
You're only seeing them in this very heightened way for the whole thing.
Exactly.
Like, I get what it's trying to do, but I think you have to be tighter if you are doing one thing repeatedly, and just upping the ante throughout,
Exactly. And instead it repeats and repeats and repeats, and then all of a sudden everything goes crazy.
Right.
Without anything building up to it. So, anything else on Antichrist? I mean, is it can you give it a watch or don't watch, or?
I can't say not to see it, because I really, I would never personally miss a Von Trier movie. But I just didn't really connect with this one. I appreciate it. I appreciate the sort of sick joke aspect of it a little more than I appreciate whether or not it has any deeper meaning.
And see, for me, movies that are a sick joke, Funny Games, I think is one that people connect to. I hated that movie, and I have no interest in a director chastising me. I want them to do it in the context of some kind of story, and this one was just barrage of pain.
What did you think of the performances, though?
I thought they were fine, but it's the definition of one note. They're doing the same thing over and over again, and there's no anchor to start them from. They start high and then just never leave that. Even Charlotte Gainsbourg, she's the one who's been getting all the praise, so I don't know if you have other feelings on this.
I don't. I actually think that they're both equally good in the film.
Mm-hmm.
But they weren't playing characters, they were playing ideas so that he can say these very exciting things about how humanity is corrupt, or
it seems like they did as well as you possibly could in that situation in which you're playing not a character.
I've always been sort of aggravated that actors have a hard time being appreciated for being very good at being an auteur vessels. If you think about Catherine Deneuve, for example, in her early career, where these great directors were just fawning all over her, and she's considered a great star, but she doesn't get a lot of credit as a great actress, partially because she's serving the movie at all times,
Mm-hmm.
And Nicole Kidman.
No, that's exactly what they're doing here.
Right, and Nicole Kidman kind of has that issue now too when she makes things like Birth. So it's so much a auteur's movie that she is giving her all to, which is what they're doing, but this is an example where I don't think that they're necessarily transcending that.
Yeah, and being unable to appreciate the movie, you're not really able to appreciate the work that they're doing, because they're kind of with Von Trier and dragging you into this madness.
Right. Whereas someone like Emily Watson in Breaking the Waves, it's a whole other level.
Yeah. So does that about wrap up what we have to say about Antichrist?
I guess. The thing is, it's one of these movies where you could talk about and I would love to have more conversations about it, which is why I recommend people see it, even though I didn't enjoy it.
There's definitely a lot to discuss, even if you hate it, and I didn't hate it, definitely.
Right, and there's a lot that's really facile about discussing it really quickly like this too. You could take individual scenes and really, dig into what they mean and what he's doing with the images. It's so much more cinematic.
Yeah.
He's doing things with the camera, and he hasn't done
and
things like that in so while.
And the black and white photography in the beginning is really something special.
Yeah, so he's going very operatic, which was kind of a treat, just because something like Dogville, which I loved, is so spare. So he's experimenting. Yeah.
And it's definitely it's the kind of filmmaking that is filmmaking, and it's effort put into it, and it's not just something that you watch, you have to participate in. And on that level, it's definitely worth seeing.
So we recommend it even without liking it.
Yes, exactly. And maybe we'll join you in complaining about it after you see it.
Okay. So I'm Nathaniel Rogers from thefilmexperience.net.
And I'm Katey Rich from cinemablend.com. I hope you've enjoyed our experiment.